greatest day in history. Death is beaten, you have rescued me. Sing it out, Jesus is alive. The empty cross, the empty grave, life eternal, you have won the day. Shout it out, Jesus is alive. He's alive. Stand in that place, free at last, meeting face to face. I am yours, Jesus, you are mine. And this joy and perfect peace, earthly pain finally will cease. Celebrate, Jesus is alive. Happy day.
So I wonder how many of us watched the Artemis II launch this week? How many of us saw that? It was quite a spectacle, wasn't it? It was absolutely an awesome thing to watch. 8.8 million pounds of thrust at liftoff, reaching a speed of 24,500 miles per hour before it entered orbit. You know, you could travel from Los Angeles to New York City in 6.5 minutes at that speed. Wow. Over the next 10 days, Artemis is going to slingshot around the dark side of the moon and make it home. They're going to travel in totality some 252,500 miles. Now, I got to tell you, you don't have to be a space geek to not see that that's incredible. Right? It's an amazing thing. Brain power, human ingenuity. That's absolutely incredible. But I got to tell you, my feelings about this have been a little jumbled this week. On the one hand, I'm just filled with excitement and awe and wonder that after all these years, we're actually heading back to the moon. That's an incredible thing. But I also have to tell you that I feel a little anxious about this. And the reason why? Well, because like many of you, I remember 2 space shuttles that exploded. One of them before they even got out of orbit, so I guess we're safe on that one. But the second one exploded as it was coming home. What if this thing blows up? My feelings are a little jumbled about this. It occurs to me that there are actually quite a few things in our life that can create that kind of feeling in us, right? That jumbledness. Here's the definition of the word. Jumbled means items or ideas mixed together in a disorderly, chaotic, or untidy mess. So let me ask that question again. There are a number of things in our life that can create that sense of jumbledness inside, right? If that's what it means. I was sitting in my van one day this past week. I was in the driveway and I turned the van on and was just sitting there waiting for it to warm up a little bit. And I looked at the yard and I realized there is an awful lot of work in the yard to be done. Anybody resonate with that one? So I started to look around and I realized the fence needs mending. The leftover leaves need gathered, sticks need to be picked up, the garden needs to be tilled, the bulbs need to be fertilized, the garden as well needs to be fertilized, the front porch needs to be painted, the shutter needs to be replaced, the flower beds need to be mulched, the playset needs tightened, there needs to be new sand gotten for the sandbox. And my eyes just kept going back and forth looking, and every time it would turn from one side to the other, I'd see something else that needed to be done. And then this occurred to me. When am I ever going to have time to do that? Anybody resonate? Jumbled. A lot of things in life can jumble us. Home improvements. Crazy busy schedules can create that sense of a jumbled feeling. Sometimes we get jumbled about our relationships, about our families, our health, the craziness of life itself can create that sense of jumbledness within us. We can get jumbled about the Pittsburgh Pirates or the Pittsburgh Penguins. We can get jumbled about our past. When we look ahead to the future, we can get that jumbled feeling as well. It seems to me that in John's record of the Easter story, Mary might have been a bit jumbled in her feelings when she comes to the tomb that first Easter morning. I mean, let's think a little bit about this. She goes from astonishment that the stone has been moved to frustration and anger that the body is gone to weeping, wailing outside the tomb to this confident clarity, I have seen the Lord. There's the gamut, right? Walk through that with me a little bit. I learned something this week. It was the Jewish custom that when a person died, family and friends of that person were supposed to go to the tomb where they were laid for 3 consecutive days after death, because the Jewish folk understood that the spirit of the person remained with the body for 3 days following death. Oh, I didn't know that. So that makes a little sense about why Mary goes to the tomb, right? She goes to the tomb because one that she loved, one that has set her free, is there. But she goes there to mourn, expecting, of course, a sealed tomb and a present body. But she finds exactly the opposite of that. I mean, she watched him die, this absolutely horrific death. Scriptures tell us that she was there and watched them, Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, put him in that tomb. Maybe she could still even recall what it sounded like for that stone to roll into that concrete groove, that stone groove, to seal up the tomb. She remembered all of that. And now she gets there, and it's all different from what she remembers. And there's this sense of mystery wrapped up with her grief. She's come to the tomb to mourn, and even that has been taken away from her now. So what does she do? She decides to run to Peter and John. Talk to them about what has happened. And they run to the tomb, and they look in, and then they're not much help to Mary. Did you catch that? They just leave. They just go home. But Mary stays. And the jumbledness of this whole thing starts to get to her. She starts to weep. She looks into the tomb, and there are 2 angels sitting there, and even 2 angels don't faze her, don't cause her grief to be less. I don't know about you, but if 2 angels in white appeared in my life and started to talk to me, that would get my attention. But not Mary. Even Jesus shows up and asks her the same questions. And even that presentation of Jesus doesn't get to her. She is just a jumbled mess. In her feelings, in her life at this point, everything is chaos. That word means a state of utter confusion. Have you been there? Been moments in your life where it has felt like utter confusion. What makes the difference? Did you catch it? All of a sudden, this guy that she thinks is the gardener calls her by name. That one word, her name. It says to her, you know what? I know who you are. And I know what's going on in your life right now. And I am here for you. Everything starts to change for Mary now. He enters into that chaos. He's present in the chaos. And he calls her by name in that place. And all of a sudden, things start to clear up. What was chaos and confusion start to clear up. That's what that Rabboni means. She calls him teacher because she recognizes the voice. And all of a sudden, everything that was all jumbled starts to unravel into this place of understanding. It's like Jesus was saying to her, I understand your feelings, Mary. But things are not as you think they are, not as you perceive they are. There's a power at work here that you can't understand. And in fact, you're not supposed to understand it. What I'm asking you to do is to simply trust me. That's the Easter truth for you and for me today. If you don't take anything else from this message, take this with you. Mary's Easter story reminds us that a very much alive Jesus enters into our chaos and calls our name and offers to take the place of confusion and chaos and bring understanding to it. The Easter truth is that the very much alive Jesus is calling your name right now, right where you are. A conversation with a friend of mine last night following our worship, before our worship service. And this friend of mine pulled me aside. This friend's been going through some really, really hard things in his life. And he pulled me aside and he said to me with tears in his eyes, he spoke to me yesterday. I said, what do you mean? He said he spoke to me and he told me that this whole thing is going to be all right. We believe in a living Jesus that is still calling people by name. It might come through a series of questions about your life, like Jesus asked Mary. It might come when somebody else shows up in your life to bring comfort or to pray for you. I got to be honest, my life, the witness of my life, is that the times that Jesus has called my name the clearest has been in the most difficult, hard times of my life. It seems that that's when we are maybe more aware, more ready to listen to the Jesus that says, I'm here. I'm with you. Trust me, even here. Now, here's the challenge, of course. In the midst of the jumbled lives that you and I live, lives that are just filled with ideas and voices that vie for our attention, how do we pick out the voice of Jesus? How do we know it's Jesus calling our name? As I thought about that this week, there are three things that I just want to say. Three things I think that can help us hear Jesus calling our name. Here's the first one. You got to get into the story. If you're not in relationship with Jesus Christ, it's going to be a little difficult to hear Him call your name. Not that He can't. But Mary recognized the voice of Jesus because she was in relationship with Him. She knew Him. She was in the story. How many of you have ever been in a group of people and you're participating in a conversation with this group of people, and all of a sudden 3 or 4 other people in that group start to talk about something else? And it's pretty apparent from that conversation that they know things about what they're talking about that you don't know. And so you feel like you're left out. You don't know what they're talking about. Have you been there? It's kind of like that here. Jesus is calling your name. And the way to get started to hear that is to make sure that you're in the story, that you've connected your life to Jesus Christ. Because if you're not connected to Him, it's going to be a little more challenging to hear Him when He calls your voice. You've got to get into the story. To quote that great theologian Bruce Almighty, as he's walking in the pouring rainstorm across the bridge, I don't want to do this anymore, God. I don't want to be God anymore. I surrender to your will. We have to come to that place. That's the first step of being willing to say, Jesus, I'm going to surrender to you. That's the first step to hear Him call our name. Now here's the second step. Once we get into the story, you got to rehearse the story. Familiarity with the story, familiarity with who Jesus is familiarity with how Jesus works in the world, all of that is, all of that, there we go, is what allows us to hear the voice of Jesus when He calls our name. So we have to rehearse the story so that we know it. Let me tell you a little bit about Tyler Cully. Tyler Cully is the grandson of our own Pastor Tom Holman. Tyler Cully is a great hockey player, a really good hockey player. And the position he plays is goalie. So I want you to think for a minute that you are Tyler Cully. And that you're in the goal and the opposing team is skating toward you and the guy right in front has got the puck and he's about ready to make a shot on goal. How do you know what to do if you are Tyler Cully? You know what to do. You know which way to put this leg or this arm or what to do with the stick. You know that because there have been multiple experiences of trying to keep a puck out of the goal. You with me? He has rehearsed that over and over and over and over again. You got to get into the story first to hear Jesus call your name. And then you got to stay familiar with it. You got to keep rehearsing it. It works that way for everything, doesn't it? How do you learn to play the piano? You play scales. How do you learn to sing? You take lessons and rehearse fundamentals every time you start to sing. How do you hit a home run? Right? You learn the fundamentals of how to hit a ball. How do you manage a 12-step program? You got to keep coming back to the steps over and over and over and over again so that they become second nature to you. Hearing the voice of Jesus is about getting into the story and staying connected to it. But there's one more part. Once you're connected to it, you got to share the story. Isn't it interesting that Jesus says to Mary, don't hold on to me. Don't cling to me. Instead, he tells her, go and share the news. Go and tell my brothers the good news that I'm alive. Bruce Miller, in his commentary, says this about that. He says the instead word in there might imply that she should not go on and on clinging to Jesus and enjoying the blessing of it when there was a group of broken men and women no great distance away who had as much need and right to know of his rising. See, when you and I hear Jesus call our name, there's always purpose behind it. Always. Always. That's the story of Mary. Jesus wants you and I to learn how to recognize the voice of Jesus in our lives so that we can help other people recognize the voice of Jesus in their lives as well. If you're going to hear Jesus call your name, and He is calling your name, you got to make sure you're in the story. It's going to help if you rehearse it. It's going to help even more if you share it with people who need to know that Jesus is calling them too. Wrap this up with a story that I shared at the Monday, Thursday service this week, and something just said to me that it needed to be shared again. It's a story about one of the most notorious prisons in the country of Brazil. The prison was the most violent, hard, almost unmanageable prison in the entire country. And the government was about ready to shut it down. They wanted to just close it because it was so unmanageable. And a couple of Christian people went to the government and said, would you give us the opportunity to try to run this prison based on Christian principles? So the government said, what have we got to lose? Go ahead and give it a try. So these two Christians started to set up the whole prison based upon Christian principles. Chuck Colson went to visit this prison once. And Chuck said it was an absolute incredible thing, starting with when he arrived at the prison. The guy who had the keys to freedom, to the outside world, was a convicted murderer. Now get that. The guy that's got the keys to the gate to the outside world is a convicted murderer. But there was a joy on his face, Chuck said, and there was an energy in his life. And when he walked into the prison, he noticed that all the other inmates were full of energy and full of industrious things that they were doing. When they walked into the prison itself, they could see on the walls that there were scripture and song lyrics all over the walls. And Chuck said to his guide, what's the driver behind all this? What makes all this work? The guide said, well, let me show you. And the guide took Chuck to the most famous part of this prison, what they called the torture chamber. And the guide said to Chuck, there's only one person in here now. Are you sure you want to see this? Chuck said, I've been in isolation cells in prisons all over the world. Sure, I want to see it. So when the guy opened the lock and pushed open the door and Chuck walked in, the only person in that room was Jesus hanging on a cross. A crucifix that had been formed and crafted by the inmates of that prison. And the guide turned to Chuck and said, do you know what makes this work? The realization that he's doing time for the rest of us. It's a powerful statement, isn't it? He's doing time for the rest of us. That was Good Friday. And as powerful a statement as that is, Easter goes one better. As powerful as a statement as he's doing time for the rest of us, that sentence has been served. Right? The tomb is empty. The torture chamber is empty. The price for our crimes have been paid, and the one who paid it is not dead but alive, here with us this morning. Now, do you know what that means? It means that when you and I come to the table of the Lord this morning, we are not coming here to remember a dead man. We are coming to celebrate and meet a living Jesus. A Jesus right now is calling your name. He's inviting you to a fresh start. Easter is about life. Easter is about fresh starts and new opportunities for the first time or for the 10th time or for the 50th time. The risen one that you meet here today is calling your name and is saying to you, let's start again. Will you hear him? Will you listen? Will you believe that the Jesus that's here is calling you?